Is your networking not working? Would you like to be net playing for net profit? I've got all kinds of fun alliterations that we can play with, but if you're like me, when you first started networking, or maybe even today, there are certain things that you know could be improved upon. When I first became a networker many, many years ago, I was what I consider a brand new beginning networker. And I didn't even know where to go. I didn't know physically where to go. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to start conversations. I didn't even know how to dress professionally. And I certainly didn't know how to follow up. I was a card collector and not a business builder. I had the stacks of cards, and I'm going to guess that you do too, which is why you're reading the book or watching the video. So as a beginning networker, I was really intimidated. I was overwhelmed. Thinking about going networking was work. It was work, right? It created anxiety. I just didn't want to go. So if you're a beginning networker and you feel that way, believe me when I tell you, I know how you feel. Now, there came a point in my networking where I was a very active networker. Tell me if you're in this position. Maybe you go to a lot of events. Maybe you go once or twice or 3 times a week. Maybe you're gathering all those cards and you are the card collector, so you got plenty of leads, but maybe not as much business as you'd like to have. I know I've been in that position before where I was doing a lot of networking, but not getting the benefit of it that I felt like I should get. I was meeting a lot of people, made some friends, but wasn't really making the money that I wanted to. Or you may be in the position where I am today, where you are a professional networker. Now, a professional networker, from my perspective, is someone who not only when they network, they make good relationships, but they actually do follow up. I like to call it communicate, conversate, collaborate to create the income, influence, and impact. Now, there's a lot of things that I can ramble off that sound really fancy like that today, because years and years later, after all the networking that I've done, literally thousands of events, thousands of them, if it had a business card and a 30-second elevator pitch as part of the routine, I've been there. I've been to them at 6 o'clock in the morning. I've been to them at noon. I've been to them at night when I had to leave my daughter with a babysitter and stay up late to go to events. I have sat in a room with 2 people or 20,000. I've been on the stage in front of 2 people or 30,000. I've done a lot of networking, and over that time, I actually have found a lot of ways that you and I can be more efficient and effective, which is why I wrote Mingle to Millions, The Art of Building Better Business Relationships and Mastering Referrals. However, I wasn't always that way. I wasn't always in a place where I was attracting business. I'll tell you a little bit later in the book about the difference between sharking a room, chasing business, being aggressive, the difference between that and actually being the fisher person and attracting business. And I was not always the person who was attracting business. As a matter of fact, about 16 years ago, I moved from one part of the country to another. Now, when I was 8 years old, I was buying gum and I was selling it to other kids for a profit. So I always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I was always looking to monetize and figure things out, which is why today it comes so naturally to me to sit down with somebody and strategize about their networking, strategize about their business, about their brand, about how they're being received and perceived in the marketplace. All that strategizing and looking at ways to monetize started with me as far back as when I was 8 years old that I remember. And as a matter of fact, talking about sharking, even back when I was 9 or 10 years old, I was loan sharking to my brother. He was 3 years older than me and he was always broke. And for some reason I always had money even back then. And so he would come to me and borrow money, and I would take things that mattered to him for collateral. And I didn't even know what collateral or loan sharking was, but there I was doing it at the ripe old age of 9 or 10. So I've been business-minded my whole life and actually moved on into being a real estate agent and a subcontractor, an independent contractor in brick and mortar businesses. But what happened was about 16 years ago when I was living in another part of the country, I had a brick and mortar business, which is very different from going out and networking. At least for me at the time, my business was a bar restaurant and people came to me. So the marketing was quite different than what I teach today with business networking. But I had a baby, and my baby's father was from another part of the country. And so we decided when she was about 4 months old to move from that part of the country to where he was from, and that's where we were going to raise our baby girl and create this family. And what happened was when I got to this new part of the country, what I realized that came with me not only was my daughter and her father and the biggest truck U-Haul makes full of stuff and a big 100-pound black lab, but the other thing that I brought with me was me and all of my addictions, all of my poor choices that I was making at the time. I had found myself in a place where even though I had been a business owner, some of the choices that I made were taking me down a path that I didn't want to go. So I got to this new area of the country and immediately the relationship did not work out. Have you ever been in a place where you were counting on someone else to have your back and to help provide, especially maybe the mothers out there, maybe the single fathers out there who have children, and you thought that there would be somebody there to help? Well, guess what? It doesn't always happen that way. And so I found myself in a new part of the country with a baby that was way less than a year old, not knowing a soul, and basically it was time to take matters into my own hands. And so I got a job. I got a job, which today is a dirty word, job. But I got this job at a place where, long story short, my boss was my boyfriend, was my drinking buddy, and we were drinking from the time we got up to the time we went to bed. And basically, I kept that job because it allowed me to drink all the time, and it was made very, very clear that I didn't have that job unless I was that person's girlfriend. And so basically, I felt like, I'll just throw it out there, I felt like a prostitute. I felt like I was doing things to keep that job that I shouldn't have been doing. And it all had to do with making bad decisions and addictions. And so there came a day when I had a moment of clarity and I thought to myself, just let go and let God. Let go and let God. Let go of this job. Let go of this relationship. Let go of these addictions and just see what else you can create, because what's going on right now is not working. I had a daughter at this point was about 2 years old, and she deserved better. I deserved better. And it was just time for me to stand up, step out, take a stand for myself. And so I did that. And I share all this with you because as I start to work with people in business strategy, when I start talking about networking, when I start talking about how to rebrand and reposition yourself in the marketplace, some people will say, well, Cammie, you don't understand my situation. You don't know where I come from. You don't understand that I'm a single mom, or that I don't have a lot of money, or I don't know a lot of people, or how I feel about myself. And so what I'll share with you is I do know. I do know exactly what it's like to be in all of those situations. So here's how my story progresses. I decide to put down the bottle. I decide to pick up my ass and get out and do something for myself. So I look in the newspaper. And for those of you who don't know what a newspaper is, it's the internet on print. And so I picked up this newspaper and there was an ad in the paper for a research assistant, I believe is how it was phrased. So I get to this interview. And let me tell you about the interview because it's a very interesting process. I showed up at the interview. My interview was for 5 p.m. I got there at 4:45 and they asked me if I wanted a cup of coffee and I said yes, that's important to the story. So I'm sitting there and one person after another keeps coming in for the same interview and I'm thinking to myself, why is everyone coming in and I'm not being called for my interview yet? So about 14 people showed up and just after 5 o'clock we were all called into a conference room together. And when we were called into that conference room together, we did one big group interview. One big group interview. And the it was a broker at a RE/MAX office, and he went around the room asking questions, him and his right-hand man, Ken. And they were asking each of us just a different question, just to see how we could handle ourselves under pressure. I don't remember everybody else's question, but I remember mine. And the question was, where do you see yourself in 3 years? And I looked him right in the eye and I said, working for you. And that was it. That's all I said. That was my interview. I got that job because I was confident, because I could hold my own in a room like that. And I have to tell you, I was only about 45 days sober, and I was not feeling as confident as I put off, but I was faking it till I could make it. And I got that job, and what a blessing that was. One of the reasons I got the job was Ken was the one who offered me the cup of coffee, and I was the only one of the 14 who took the cup of coffee, and it turns out he was a big coffee drinker, so he felt bonded with me. I don't know. It's funny how the universe gives us what we need when we need it. So I start working for this real estate office, and I was the assistant. I did basically everything a listing agent would do except for going on the appointments. So everything from going to the different cities around the area and getting the tax card, to taking pictures at the properties, putting up the signs, doing some computer things, looking up phone numbers, creating listing packets, etc. And while I was at this office, I got a lot of mentoring. Thank God. Thank God I got a lot of mentoring from these folks. And after about 1.5 years of working there, I actually got my real estate license. And here's where the fun begins for me and you. Because you're reading this book today because you want to learn, I'm going to guess, how to create business relationships that are meaningful and masterful. You're wanting to know how to create masterful referrals and have business come to you and not have to always chase people down. So when we learn how to communicate in the right way, we can then have masterful conversate, which turns into the collaborate. Then we can create the income, influence, and impact. So when I got my license about 1.5 years into working at that office, all of a sudden now I was being thrown out into the mix to create business. And at that time, I still didn't know many people, and I certainly didn't have a center of influence to tap into, and I needed to find business. So I started going to networking events. And as I was going to these networking events, I started to realize I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was hungry enough, and I was tenacious enough, and I was desperate enough, and I was in so much survival mode and scarcity. Have you ever been there where you're going to these networking events because you know you're supposed to, everybody tells you that that's what you're supposed to do, but somewhere inside you're not really wanting to be there, and you're doing it because you got to make this thing work. You got to prove to your boss that you can do it. You want to move up the leaderboard and hit the different marks in your office. So I'm going to these networking events early in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. My daughter at this time is getting to be 3-4 years old, and I'm leaving her with babysitters and going on these appointments. And thank God I was as hungry as I was, because I went so often that even as much as I messed it up, and I'm telling you, I messed it up royalty. I can't tell you how many bridges I burned, how many relationships that I didn't make and don't have today, because I just was so sharkish. I was so sharky. I was so aggressive that it was a real turnoff. I would chase people, and I would hound them, and I would pressure them. And all of those things that I see so often out at networking events. And or I just wouldn't follow up. Maybe my ego got in the way, or maybe I didn't know what to say, or maybe I just figured they were going to call me. I talk about that a lot too. I see a lot of people spraying and praying. They're spraying those business cards everywhere, just assuming that other people are going to call them. And let's be honest, how often, how many hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of cards have you given out and gotten back where there just was nothing else ever happened other than maybe a bulk email and you got added to somebody's newsletter? So all of that was happening for me, but little by little over the years, I came up with so many ways to create relationships. I realized that being aggressive didn't work, and guess what? There were a lot of books that I read, there were a lot of seminars that I went to, and there were a lot of mentoring and training that I took on so that I could actually learn about the other personalities and understand that the way that I was being was repelling. It was repulsing people from me. And so as I learned about all these things that I was doing wrong, I also learned about things that I could do right. And as I was watching the room at hundreds and thousands of events, I've come up with a system that will help you, just like it has helped me, to be able to build better business relationships and master referrals.